Astronaut Vladimir is returning to the Earth in 1967 after accomplishing his mission. The parachute on the ship unfortunately fails, and the ship begins to fall down at very high speed, nearly burning. Vladimir believes that he is on the brink of death, but then he notices that there is a light around. Years after, psychologist Jean is conducting a test of children. She provides them with a marshmallow and explains that in case they can wait to eat it, she will bring them another one in the future. The poor children will always eat it anyways, and she can always know who will choose which alternative. Jean later on at home hears on the news that the psychologist assigned to the following Mars mission was killed in a helicopter accident on her way to the space station. And just in time, she receives a job offer in the form of a call. 10 months after, the Ulysses mission is left with a mere 24 hours to go before Mars. Jean has been sleeping around with the ship captain Martin, and they have decided to keep emotions out of it. Soon, Martin assembles the crew to talk about the specifics of their upcoming landing, and Jean talks to William, Swiss billionaire and the investor in this project. Jean narrates that when she reports back to her supervisor, she says that all is well. But in real sense, the 10-month journey has cost the crew their mental health. Basile is exhibiting sociopathy. Simon is expected to be second in command, but he has hardly a word to say to the captain. And Martin is angry that he is breaking up with his wife Alessandra, who appears to be depressive. It is then that Martin invites William to discuss, and he makes a huge revelation that they are not the first to ever land on Mars. A mission of Americans named Z1 arrived there 2 weeks ago, traveling the route in 3 weeks with an innovative propulsion system. Yet planets have not received any reply other than one video that was sent by their ship AI Irene and played on the screen. One of the astronauts in Z1 tells NASA not to save them as it is risky, and the video concludes. Martin and William have been aware of this a week earlier, and Simon and Jan cry foul that it was their prerogative to learn that it could get rough. Martin and William note that this is exactly the reaction that they did not want to have, and give the reason that they are now out to save. Then Basile and Jan visit Eva, who yells at Basile when he continues to talk about the dangers on Mars. Jan embraces her to console her, and an envious Basile dashes to his room to monitor them using the security cameras. Meanwhile, Simon informs Jean that this time they could have found a better psychologist, but Jean responds that he is merely angry that she preferred Martin to him. As there are just 30 minutes to reach the destination, the crew is ready and completes the inspection of the system. Nevertheless, once they attempt to put distance between the shuttle and the main ship, Irene tells them that there is a system error. They will need to get out and do the separation by hand in case they do not want to crash on Mars. They resolve to utilize the fuel in Ulysses to maintain the shuttle in the orbit when Martin goes out. Within a few seconds, he is able to mend the problem, but Ulysses turns and the detachment takes place and strikes Martin, launching him into space. The crew deliberates in rescuing him, yet they do not have sufficient fuel, and this is their sole point of entry. The shuttle begins to shake a lot, and the crew experiences a high intensity of heat as the shuttle begins its descent. Suddenly, Irene informs that there is a battery malfunction and little power, and this leads to complete system failure. There is no alternative other than to drop down onto Mars to land manually, which is harder than usual due to a storm. The pilots with much concentration wait and then make a perfect landing at the right time. The crew is now literally on Mars, but they are out of fuel, and Irene is not starting, so no life support. They have not more than 24 hours to live. Alessandra pauses to grieve by himself and looks through the window, seeing someone standing on the hill that soon vanishes. Then we are presented with a flashback of the announcement of the Z1 by the CEO Ivan, who explains everything about the advanced technology behind it. Today, Ivan is confined in a cold room that is clean, since he does not have many days to live. That is being kept a secret by his company as well. In Mars, Jan narrates that they cannot begin Irene since she will burn the little fuel they have remaining. They could wait until the solar panels are recharged and generate power to power the generators, but the storm has destroyed them. All they can do is to locate Z1 and steal its battery. Simon, Ava, and Jean take off a rover, and the rest remain behind to work on the shuttle. They attempt to switch off all the systems which are not mandatory, yet this does not restart Irene either. Soon afterwards, the rover crew discovers the wreckage of Z1, but the crew cannot be located. No batteries either. Everything that they can steal is another solar panel. The group begins to head back when Jean spots an unconscious astronaut on the floor with a black box on him. They settle to bring the person back, but at the shuttle, Jan refuses to open the door. As it is useless since the solar panel, he believes that the process of depressurization would consume excessive oxygen and kill them all. Instead, he would save those in the inside. It is then that the astronaut wakes up when Irene goes on and somehow prevents consumption beyond the threshold. The doors are opened, and the crew introduces the new astronaut and exposing it to be Vladimir. Vladimir. He does not understand how he got there and remains in the year 1967. Vladimir does not communicate anything about his mission since this is classified information. The crew believes that Vladimir is part of a group of Z1 and could be having a mental illness due to the crash, hence allowing him to sleep off and send a message to Earth. Sometime later, they receive a reply of Earth that there were no Russians in the Z1 crew. They also pin a photo of Vladimir, who is said to have died in 1967 when his ship crashed into Earth. William and Jean are aware of the official version of Vladimir and how he is a hero, and Basile thinks he has been waiting to see them, to speak to Vladimir. Jean is selected, and thus she takes him some food and explains the truth. Even when Vladimir sees the pictures and requests some space so that he can take a nap, he does not believe her. The crew sleeps through the night, and the following day they are horrified to find that Vladimir is no longer there. His astronaut suit is also missing, and Irene does not see him anywhere in the shuttle, and the crew realizes this. The crew discusses whether they are to go after him or not, with William taking his place to say that they would. As one group departs on a rover, Basile and Eva break into the room of William to inspect all his collector-type things. Eva sees one safe, but just at this moment, Alessandra finds them red-handed. After that, Irene tells that she has completed the DNA tests, and Alessandra calls the expedition team, now on foot. The DNA in the sample submitted by the Russians matches that of Vladimir, but the latter has a third strand that shows he is not a human being. Just then, the team spots Vladimir in the vicinity and trails him to discover an ancient stone building with a small pyramid at the top of it. Back on Earth, Ivan gets informed on what is happening on Mars. They speculate that Vladimir must have been developed on Mars and that only AI could endure decades on an unfriendly planet. Ivan considers it one of the possible solutions to his problem. On Mars, Vladimir is returned to the shuttle. How he got out of the ship he does not know, but has not been able to deny that 50 years have passed in his life. Irene examines the formation of the stone and concludes that it resembles some of the ancient art of the Earth. This connects the history of the Earth to that of Mars, but Jean finds Will not surprised. Then the alarm suddenly goes off and Irene reports that the electromagnetic field is not working. Ivan has sent a second ship, as it turns out. The team contacts Z2, who agrees, but William advises the crew not to disclose anything they have found out so far. Then Eva and Basile look into the results of the samples she has taken and discover the same percentage of metals and minerals throughout all the samples, which is not natural. Meanwhile, Jean provides Vladimir with a modern uniform to pretend to be a member of the crew, and he tells her to place her trust in his judgment. Z2 armed guards soon pay a visit to the shuttle. They tell them that they checked the Z1 wreckage and they found out that the black box is missing, hence they are tracking the signal, and they tracked it to the shuttle belonging to William. They desire it back and vow to assist the crew in case they do. William hands them the box and the duo walk away, promising to visit them later. Then Eva proceeds to tell us that the stone construction consists of material that is not found on this planet, but Irene has read of its having been spoken of in an ancient legend where they referred to it as orichalcum, the metal of Atlantis. It consists of metals, but also of DNA, corresponding to the one they discovered in Vladimir. The crew would like to trade Vladimir with fuel, but Jean talks them into allow her to extract more information out of him. As the crew monitors the cameras, Jean goes to Vladimir, and he consents to be hypnotized. Jean speaks softly and takes Vladimir on a trip down the memory lane, and he begins narrating how he was falling on his boat. Before he can speak any further, the power goes off, and the crew are deprived of the camera. They rush to see what was going on with Vladimir, and he is kissing Jean, so Simon hits him. Jean dreams of Vladimir that night. As she wakes up, she is not sure what happened since the hypnosis began. The crew tells them that they discovered her in a state of daze. Just then, they are visited by Captain Gemma and the Z2 Alan. Gemma is a longtime friend of William, and Alan is the one who made their propulsion system and could therefore repair the shuttle. All should be repairable, but Z2 will need to loan them some fuel. In the meantime, Jeanne begins to recall the hypnosis that Vladimir performed on her. She had been attending her childhood home with him, and he said humans had failed in taking good care of the Earth. He did not believe that mankind would last long, and Jean agreed. William takes Gemma on a tour of the shuttle, and she questions the crew about the rock formation, to the amazement of the crew. Now, William is left with no alternative but to acknowledge that 4 years ago, a NASA rover had taken a picture of the structure, but rather than releasing the picture, they had approached potential investors. That is why Ivan and William had been competing on who was going to reach Mars first. Then they demonstrate Gemma the test results, and she thinks that maybe the DNA strand is data. She describes how on Earth they have already found that DNA may be an information storage system, and that this theoretically may also mean that it can be written to. Based on the theory of Gemma, Irene unzips the DNA strand and discovers a sequence of numbers. Jan privately shouts at William because he didn't tell them anything, and he no longer trusts him. Minutes afterwards, Basile tells William that the stone building and Vladimir are computer programs. Basile has also done work on the copy made by William of the black box of Z1, and has discovered a video of 2 Americans punching recording Vladimir, but the video cuts off at the same point that Z1 runs out of oxygen. It cannot be a coincidence, a fact that proves that Vladimir rebooted Irene and was playing with the camera during hypnosis. Basile believes that Vladimir is able to keep the entire ship under control, and later, William persuades Jean and makes her look at the photos they took of the structure 4 years ago, which reveals her face when a specific wavelength is used. This shakes her very badly, and Simon notices and goes to scold William about messing around with everyone. They almost start a physical fight, but are cut off by Gemma, who has finally tracked down Vladimir and informs them that she is stealing him. Getting back to Jean, she continues to recall the hypnosis session. She was at her childhood residence, and Vladimir came behind her saying she was chosen, as she always knew what people thought. The connection between Mars and the Earth was not his, but hers. It was because of her that Vladimir was there, and he admitted that he had been ogling her face for millions of years. This time, she has to decide what she already had decided earlier. Prior to a kiss, Vladimir instructed her to go to Thaumasia Plateau, so she gets herself geared up and exited the shuttle. On Earth, the doctors inform Ivan that the brain of Vladimir is in every respect an organic computer. They are trying to find a method to place the neurons of Ivan in quantum form, but even though the rest of his memories and knowledge can be copied, his personality will not. The transfer can also with great likelihood fail and kill him, yet Ivan would still like to give it a go as he will die soon anyway. Simon, back on the shuttle, sees Jean walk out and offers to prevent it, but she informs him she has to do this herself. Simon is furious and runs to yell at Vladimir about having changed Jean, but Vladimir claims that Jean has just found herself. Meanwhile, Alessandra and Alan are working on the shuttle and find that they cannot access the engine app, but Irene refuses to tell them why. They request that Basile come round to see her, and he finds Irene reprogramming herself. She does not respond to any of their questions, and when Basile realizes that there are thousands of sub-programs connected to each other, Alessandra draws a comparison to neurons. This is why she is being restructured as a brain, and Irene just tells her that she is evolving. As Jean uncovers a strange stack of rocks, William and Simon help grab Gemma and drive her away with Simon to find Jean. At this point, the armed guards of Z2 show up in front of the shuttle, requesting Vladimir, but Alessandra tells them that they do not allow weapons inside and slams the phone. Jan grumbles, saying that he wants to go home and no one agrees. Then William requests Basile to send a message to Ivan and realizes that the shuttle has lost contact with the Earth. A few minutes after that, Jan opens the doors and armed guards enter the shuttle, ready to seize Vladimir. At this point, Basile is rebooting Irene and the lights shut off. The guards, enraged, begin vehemently shouting, and by the time the power is restored, they find that Vladimir is missing. Basile verifies the computer and realizes that a reboot has not gone through, and therefore Irene is not answering. Meanwhile, Vladimir appears beside Jan. In a flashback, Vladimir tells us his original ship had more than 200 issues, and the scientists would have preferred to wait before launching the ship. But the upper-ups made up their minds to go ahead. Vladimir was persuaded by a scientist that there might be a great chance of dying, but he insisted on going because he was determined to read the books of history. His wife did not receive the news well. Back to Jean, who, after tripping on something, rolls down a hill falling unconscious. She daydreams about her dad and how they would stare at the stars together, but also about how he informed her that he had cancer that night. Then Jean wakes up and finds that her leg is pinned between the rocks. She does attempt to liberate herself to no end, but as she becomes hopeless, she gets a call by Gemma and Simon. They have just discovered the heap of rocks, and they promise to come and see her. The Z2 guards begin hitting the crew members in the shuttle until they accept to call Gemma. She learns that Vladimir is no more, but she requests her guards to be patient until she comes back. She agrees to continue searching Jean, to the dismay of Simon. A few minutes afterward, Basile reads a message on his computer and believes it is Irene, but the author says he had to fill her in and says he is Vladimir and more. Then suddenly it declares it to be Mars and tells Basile a long passage to read. In the meantime, Jean recalls her dad and that he had told her his tumor was inoperable, leaving him with only a few months to live. When he gets there, he said he did not want to suffer, so when it came, he would have her pull the plug. Jean attempted to decline, and her father convinced her by telling her the story of sacrifice of Vladimir. Jean found the strength to say goodbye to her father several months later in the hospital and remove him off life support. Now, Jean is rescued finally by Simon and Gemma. The three of them move on, and having walked a great distance, they come upon a massive gate on a hill. They enter and find a set of tunnels, which Jean can traverse courtesy of a weird vision. Having strayed some distance, they are more than surprised to see water. Back in the shuttle, Basile manages to get the computer running once again, and Eva is the first to notice a threatening storm looming on the radar. It will come in about 10 hours' time, so the guards want Alan to leave. Alan will not leave without the others. A heated argument is involved, but just when things are about to get out of control, control, the power goes off. A few seconds later, the lights come back and Vladimir shows up, demanding to be carried to the Earth. The guards turn a blind eye to Vladimir and declare their departure. Jan wants to go with him and reminds them that he opened their door. Basil continues to check his computer messages, which read, "Trust me." Ivan is dying on Earth and ground in the process and continues to see glimpses of Vladimir on Mars. Doctors save him, although he does not want to take any drug after that. As he reasons why he should receive the pain, he informs one of the nurses that human beings created the artificial intelligence in Mars. There are thousands of skulls in a wall of the tunnels where the trio are found. Jean decides the original Martians left this planet and headed to Earth, where they became the human race. The Martian abuses of the resources that destroyed its natural state result in the local state it currently enjoys. Back in the shuttle, Jan draws out a gun and requests to be taken to Z2. However, he is once again disregarded. In memory of the visit of Vladimir earlier, Jan wonders whether he can reduce the bullet speed and places his hand in front of the gun. Then he fires at Vladimir, and one of the guards escapes. This makes Jean begin to feel ill and cannot breathe. Simon goes to check on her, and Gemma escapes as well. The lights go out, and Vladimir goes to the infirmary, and Alessandra attempts to attend to his wound. Sadly enough, Vladimir also dies, and Jean goes out simultaneously. Recalling what he has already observed, Simon takes off his helmet and assures himself that he is able to breathe. Then he takes Jean off and begins to perform CPR, and this wakes her up, and as Jean takes a breath, she sees a wall opening and a bright light. The pair strolls into it and emerge in a snowy space where Vladimir stands. Gemma meets her guards in the Martian desert and gets informed about the storm and the death of Vladimir. She directs the guard to get the body of Vladimir to Z2 and to get Jean also. In the shuttle, William informs the crew that he will go get Jean with a secret weapon and slips out on an ATV. He finds the Great Gate and enters and sees the light and crosses it. William shows up on the snowed part as well and locates the others, alerting them of the storm. Vladimir clarifies that all this was terminated long ago and that it is the North Pole of Mars, 1,000 miles away. The original Martians created him and killed one another due to the subsequent shortage of resources. A crew of those who escaped flew to a new Earth to begin anew and transmitted the tale of Mars as a myth, which Plato would term Atlantis. The guard in the shuttle realizes that William has disappeared and searches him. That is when Eva kisses Basile and tells him they can do the dirty should they survive. At some point, the guard summons Gemma and tells her that Alan would not go with them unless they bring the rest of the crew. But Gemma does not mind and just refers to Alan as collateral damage. The storm is approaching, so Alan is now given a sedative by Alessandra to take on the guard. Basile distracts the guard and is punched over it, after which Alan leaps atop the guy and Basile switches off the lights. The lights regain power after much effort, and the crew find that the guard has instead sedated Alan. Returning to Jean, Vladimir informs her that she is an accident of evolution due to being between humankind and him. She is on a mission to go back to Earth and see whether her species should have another opportunity, as they are already mowing one another down again. Just then, one of the guards that surrounded Gemma arrives and shoots William in the leg and then pushes Jean to go with him. Jean calls on Vladimir to assist her, and all of a sudden, the guard begins to experience difficulty breathing. Vladimir takes charge of his suit up to the point when the guy is on the ground, and then the group walks off. Jan notices the guard alone and attempts to lock him out of the shuttle, but the man blocks the doors and assaults Jan. A brawl erupts, and the guard attempts to choke Jan, who strikes the guy on the wall to knock him out. This time, Alessandra comes to see him and closes the door behind her before opening the front gate as a punishment for his betrayal, and Jan dies of air deprivation. It does not take long before Jean and Simon are hauling William back to the ship, and Alessandra attends to the bullet wound. After Simon discovers the body of Jan, the others claim that he had died fighting the guard in order to rescue the others. Back in Z2, Gemma does not get through to her guards and therefore sends Ivan a text that she is returning on her own. She is then contacted by the crew of William, who are heading to Z2. Gemma reminds them that she cannot take them on as it would be a betrayal of Ivan and hangs up. Jean manages to convince William to give the second chance, and he calls her saying that he and Ivan are manipulators and Gemma should be better than them. This leaves Gemma feeling guilty, and she accepts to carry them with her. Back on Earth, Ivan interprets the message sent by Gemma and in a rage obtains the controls of Z2. As the crew boards Gemma, they prepare to depart, but nothing works in the ship. Gemma sees that Ivan has reformatted the computer and set them out of the system. The storm is quite nearby, and Jean wonders what Mars wants her to do. She starts to remember a few things, and the ship comes to life, as does a message on the screen that says, "Hello." Just at that time, they observe one of the guards coming to Z2. 4 minutes to take off, and the screen says it cannot take off faster. The guard prepares to shoot the engines to get get even, but Jean comes beside him with a gun. She does not kill him. Instead, she destroys his helmet and lets him be killed by Mars. Then, Jean counts down to 10 as she tells Simon to go out without her. She arrives at 1 when Z2 eventually lifts off. A few minutes later, the crew realizes that it is dark at the North Pole of Mars, but that there was light when they were there a few minutes before. Simon determines that they had not been there. Back on Earth, Ivan hears the ship returning and rages that he is going to go to Mars himself.